Hello, students at Tazewell Elementary Schools. Hello, hello, and thank you for having me. I had hoped we could do this visit in person, but we are doing it through a video, which is wonderful too. So my name is Jamie Bryant, and I actually grew up in Richlands, Virginia. And some of you might recognize where I'm sitting right now. I'm actually at Clinch Valley Memorial Cemetery here in Richlands, Virginia. And my book's not about this cemetery, but there is a story in my book that I'm going to be sharing with you about today called Cemetery Hill. And the story actually took place in this very cemetery. So a little bit about me. I am an author. And my latest book that I wrote is called Fish, Guts, and Other Bedtime Stories. And this book is a nonfiction book, so basically it's a book of true stories. They are told from my perspective as a young girl about my life growing up here in Richlands. So we'll be talking a little bit more about the book in a few minutes, but I did want to point that out to you. So, a little bit about me. I was born at the hospital here in Richlands, Virginia. Maybe some of you were born here too, yes? Well, I lived in the Brickyard. Do any of you know where the Brickyard is? You do? You do? Awesome, awesome. Well, I lived in the Brickyard. That's where I grew up. And actually, my dad worked at the Brickyard, and so did my grandma and grandpa, who lived next door to us when I lived there. So I spent a lot of time in that area, as did they. My mom, she actually worked at a place that is no longer in existence, and maybe some of your grandparents or even your great-grandparents might know about this place, but it was a clothing factory, and it was called Eastern Isles. And so my roots, as you can gather, are right here in your hometown of Richlands. So that's a little bit about me and where I grew up. When I was in 5th grade, we did move to Tazewell. So for all you Tazewell kids, yay, I moved to Tazewell. I loved both places, but we did move to Tazewell, and I went to 5th grade in Tazewell and 6th grade. Went to Tazewell Junior High, and I graduated from Tazewell High School. So that's a little history about me and growing up. And so you may think to yourself, well, so what are you doing back here? Well, currently I do live in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and so I was in for a visit this week, and I was hoping to get to meet all of you all in person, but because of everything going on right now, we are meeting with a Google Meet. So this is how it's being done, so I'm so excited to have this video. So a little bit I wanted to share about myself. We did move away. I graduated Tazewell High School. My husband joined the Air Force, and we traveled a little bit. We went to California, we went to England, overseas, and we landed in Texas, where we spent the next 30 years, but then we landed eventually a couple of years ago up in Green Bay. So some interesting things about my life. I have 3 children, and they are all grown up, and between those 3 children I have 10 grandkids. So we love them all so much, and they range from 4 months old all the way up to 15 years old. I have a dog. Do any of you guys have dogs? You do? Anybody have a big dog? Yes? Any of you have teeny tiny dogs, little dogs? Oh. How about medium-sized dogs? Oh. Well, do any of you have a dog that is spoiled? Oh, yes. I would say most of us that have a dog is spoiled. Well, as you can see, I'm putting my dog Gracie on the screen right now so you can see her. Isn't she cute? Yes, yes. Well, she's kind of cute, but she is a little bit crazy, I will say. And a lot of people, once they meet her, because she's so hyper, they call her Crazy Gracie. And then I actually take her to a doggy daycare sometimes. That's where they babysit her for me while I'm working. And I don't know why, but they call her Chicken. Does she look like a chicken to you? No, she doesn't really look like a chicken to me either, but I think it's because her hair sticks up right here sometimes, so they call her Chicken. But anyway, I just call her Spoiled because she is kind of rotten. So we do have our dog Gracie. So a little bit about, let me get back to the book, but first of all, I actually have a question for you all. So tell me, boys and girls, do any of you like to write? Like stories? You like to enjoy writing stories? I'm going to guess, if you're in at least the first grade and up listening to this today, that every week, probably at least, your teachers are having you do some writing. You're writing sentences. Some of you are maybe writing about what you did on the weekend, your short stories. So some of you, even though you don't even know it yet, you're already writing. And you could be an author one day if that's something that you chose to do. Some of you are probably thinking, oh, I don't like to write and I don't want to be an author. But I'll bet you like to draw. Do any of you like to draw? Yes? Yes? Oh, I bet a bunch of you enjoy drawing. And in the author world, we call someone who likes to draw or does our art an illustrator. So I actually like to draw, but you probably wouldn't want to see my artwork. It's kind of like, have you ever saw the little stick people? That's kind of what my artwork would look like. So I actually pay people to do my artwork. I pay someone to do the covers for my books in fish guts. They're actually, in this new revised version, there's a pencil drawing, it's called pencil art, about each story. So I paid someone to do those for me. I do some picture books as well. I have some younger children picture books, and those I do pay the artist to do those as well. So even if you're maybe not interested in writing or being an author, you might be thinking, wow, I could maybe get paid someday just for drawing something I already enjoy and love doing. Well, yes, you could. So if you enjoy that, keep drawing, keep illustrating, because maybe you'll even do that as something later on as part-time or just for fun for your own family. So enough about author and illustration. I am super excited. 20 years ago, I wrote this book titled Fish Guts and Other Bedtime Stories. And I published it, and it didn't look like this. It actually had kind of a yellowish cover. And then after several years, I have relaunched it. It actually just relaunched in November with this brand new cover, and my illustrator who did the front and back cover, brand new. And then, like I said, I also added the pencil art. And so you guys are so blessed. So your school board, your school, has actually purchased a couple of copies for each school. So if you didn't end up getting one on your own, you'll hopefully get an opportunity to check it out from the school. So I do want to tell you, while we're on this time today, a couple of the titles of some of the stories. Well, the first story is actually called The Spanking. Well, you boys and girls may not know this, but years and years ago, in the 1960s, when I went to school in Richlands, we actually got spankings when we got in trouble. So that was a long time ago, but I do have a story about the day I got a spanking at school. And of course, I was innocent, of course, right? Right? Well, you'll have to read the story to find out. There's a story in here called Sloppy Joe's, Bath Time, Missed Santa Again, Lightning Bugs. Anybody like to catch lightning bugs? I always loved doing that. It was so fun. A story called Snow Day. How many of you are getting excited about the first snow day this year? You are? Yes. Who likes to build snowmen? Raise your hand. Who likes to tear down snowmen after somebody else builds them? You do? That's fun. And I'm just going to guess that maybe one or two of you enjoy having a good old-fashioned snowball fight or a snowball war. You do? Cool. That's awesome. Rock fight. That's not something I recommend, but it is one of the stories in the book. King of the Mountain. Have any of you ever played King of the Mountain? You have? You haven't? Well, if you haven't, I'm not going to tell you how the whole game is played today, but go home, ask your parents, your grandparents, maybe your aunt, or even your teachers after this video today, hey, what's she talking about? What's King of the Mountain? New game we need to learn to play, because that was a favorite game when I was growing up. Christmas Tree Hill. How many of you know about Christmas Tree Hill? Well, I have a story I wrote about Christmas Tree Hill. It's a little scary, but at least it was for us. And so that'll be on one of my YouTube channels later if you all want to check that out. But Christmas Tree Hill is a story. Can you believe it? There is a story in this book called Fish Guts. Yes, there is. And so that is actually, in just a few minutes, I'm going to be showing you, I'm going to be reading to you the Fish Guts story that I did on my YouTube channel. Now let me warn you just right now, if you are a little squeamish, you might have to go, ah, and close your eyes, because there is maybe in the video some fish guts, real ones, yep. Another story is called The Cage, and that was about a day I went to the carnival and rode a ride called The Cage. A story called Nightcrawlers. Everybody went hunting for nightcrawlers, or at least put one on your hook? You have? Awesome. There is a story called Surprise Supper, one called Road Trip, a story called The Big One. There's a story called Firecracker Powder. I'm going to say right now, don't ever do what you read in that story. It did not end well. Snake on the Path is the title of one of my stories. Pajama Party. How many of you boys have had a pajama party? Wah, wah, wah. Yeah, kind of girls have pajama parties. Boys have campouts, right? Sure. But there's a story in here called The Pajama Party. There's a story in here called Cemetery Hill, which is about this very cemetery. And there's also, last but not least, a story in here called Man of War. And so I'll have to let you figure that one out. So without any further ado, I'm going to pause and we're going to watch the YouTube channel where I read the story with some squeamish scenes called Fish Guts. Here it comes. Hello, boys and girls, moms and dads. Welcome to Storytime with Jamie. I'm so glad you've tuned in today, and today's actually a very, very special day. But first of all, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, be sure and subscribe down below. And also, if you want to check out this book or this story today or any of my other books, you can go to jamiebryantbooks.com. Well, the reason today is like super excited. I'm actually just released my second edition of my book titled Fish Guts and Other Bedtime Stories. It's been a long time in the making, but this new second edition, it's been almost 20 years since the first edition, but this one has some pencil art, just a few little nuances, but I think you're going to love it. And of course, the biggest change is the cover. Super excited about this new cover, and I can't wait for you to check it out. Well, today, since I'm relaunching the new book, I am going to read the story Fish Guts from the book Fish Guts and Other Bedtime Stories. Well, my daddy loved to fish, and he was good at it. We could fish all day, and I'd barely get a nudge on my hook while my dad reeled in fish after fish. Trout was a familiar meal at our home. Sometimes my dad would clean the fish at the river, but most of the time the cleaning took place at our home. My cousin Annette and I were playing in the front yard with some of my friends when my dad drove in from his fishing adventure that day. We both went running toward the car. "Did you catch any?" I asked. Even though I already knew the answer, my dad always caught some. "You'll see," he said as he opened the cooler for us. "Wow!" exclaimed Annette as she viewed the cooler more than half full of fish. We were definitely having a fish fry tonight. Dad picked up the cooler and headed towards the house. Occasionally, Dad would clean them outside or ask Mom to do the messy job. However, today he was doing the honors himself. Dad brought the bucket of fish right into our small trailer kitchen. One by one, he took them off the line they had earlier been strung on, and he began piling them in our kitchen sink. For me, this was great fun, but of course, I wasn't getting my hands dirty. My dad would take the fish one at a time and place them on a cutting board. He positioned the cutting board on the countertop right beside our kitchen sink. Dad would pull out his trusty pocket knife and off would go the head. Dad would just kind of flip it over in the sink, and that's where he started his pile of fish remains. Once the head was off, he took an object similar to a pot scraper and scaled the fish. Basically, he would take the scraper up and down the fish's body, scraping all those scales out into the sink. Next, he carefully opened up the insides, which was kind of like cutting rubber or something similar. Well, everything that fish had eaten in the last day or so came oozing out. Oh, this was a disgusting sight. Next, Dad would use his same pocket knife and scoot all those guts and stuff into the sink with the fish head. Dad would put his finished fish on ice until supper time and pick up the next one for the slaughter. This particular day had been a really good catch for my dad. I can't remember if there were 12 or 15 or maybe even more, but there were a lot. One by one with the heads, then they were gutted, and the remains kept piling up in the kitchen sink. Finally, the last fish was done, and my mom was going to start the frying soon. Getting rid of the insides and heads was next. Dad took an empty old bread bag and started picking up the guts and heads with his bare hands. He put them inside the plastic bread bag, handful by handful. Taking out the full bag of fish guts was a common chore for me at age 8. I heard him call my name, and I went to the door to get the bag. Dad handed the bag to me after he had tied it securely shut. I was supposed to take the bag and throw it over the side of the fence. Usually the neighborhood cats would feast on the remains later. I had the bag in my hand and was anxious to get rid of it so I could go back to playing with my cousin Annette. Annette had come over to our house to play for the day. "What you got?" she yelled as I headed out the door. "Fish guts! You want some?" She screamed, and I proceeded on towards the fence to get rid of the smelly bag. Well, being a normal kid, I couldn't just give one giant swing and throw the bag over the fence. I decided to build up some momentum and speed. First, I did the swirl thing with the bag, just swirling it around and around. Then I would spin it back and forth and side to side. I would have probably continued this for a few more minutes until I heard my cousin Annette shout, "You're it!" That got my attention, and I finally remembered that we were in the middle of a game of tag when my dad had called me. Well, this motivated me to go ahead and complete my mission. With all the strength I had, I began to swing the bag round and around and around and around in a Ferris wheel motion. But what happened next left me stunned. Without any warning, the bag split open and fish guts went flying. Instead of the whole bag going over the fence in front of me, the bag busted open behind me. I quickly looked up to find Annette covered from head to toe in fish guts. There were even a couple of the heads lying motionless on top of her head. The rest of the fish guts were scattered all over her body. There were parts on her legs and down her arms, and even some on her shoulders. Her shirt was disgusting, but probably the worst part was her face. Some pieces had landed on her cheek and there was a little strand hanging out one of her nostrils. Annette could barely keep one of her eyes open as something was oozing off of one of her eyelids. She was standing there holding out her arms like this, going, "Ah! Ah!" My friends and I wanted to help, but the sight of her caused everyone who had been playing nearby to burst out in laughter. We laughed and we looked and we realized she needed help, but what could we do without touching her? I'm not sure how long we stood there, bewildered and laughing uncontrollably. But finally, my mom came outside, and the look on her face told us we were in trouble. I quickly explained it was an accident. "Accident or not," my mom shouted. "Help your cousin Annette get that stuff off of her." Well, the next few minutes were spent pulling the remains out of her hair and off of her back and arms. We moved the pieces stuck to her eyelash and the one near her nostril. Ooh! We hadn't bargained for pieces to be inside the crevices of her ear, but they were there nonetheless. It was awful. Ooh, we finally picked all the yuck off of her, but the smell was still horrible. We took her clothes and threw them in the trash, and Mom informed the crowd of kids that the party was over and everybody needed to go home. My mom, Annette, and I went inside and straight for the bathroom. I remember walking past my dad, and I'm sure I saw a little grin on his face. Well, 2 baths and 4 hair shampoos later, Annette began to smell and look like her old self again. By this time, it was near bedtime, and we began preparing ourselves for bed. Up to this point, though, she had still not wanted to talk about it or have any of us so much as crack a smile about what had happened. This was really hard because although it was a horrible thing, it was also horribly funny. Well, we readied ourselves for bed and sat down to have some popcorn that Mom had popped for us. I let Annette choose a TV show. She certainly deserved it after the day she had been through. She was still very quiet, only barely smiling when a joke was told on the TV show we were watching. Well, the show was over and we were off to brush our teeth. We went to my room and my mom tucked us in. The lights were finally out and I was on the top bunk with Annette on the bottom. We talked a little and then the room got quiet for a few minutes. I was the first to break the silence. "Annette," I whispered. "Yes," she whispered back. In a not-so-quiet voice, I said, "Oh!" We both burst out laughing. The fish gut episode finally had a humorous ending, even for the victim. And I'll give you a little sneak peek. There's actually a picture of Annette at the end of that story, a picture of what she looked like back then. Well, what did you think about that story, boys and girls? Did you like it? Yes? Awesome, awesome. I hope a lot of you go fishing. Have any of you ever gutted a fish? No? Yes? Maybe? Well, I gutted a few in my time, but I haven't gutted any recently. Well, I hope you enjoyed this story today, and as I said, my book is live now, ready for purchase. You can get it in a digital format, or of course, you can get a copy of your own. But if you like today's story, be sure and subscribe to my channel. Give us a thumbs up. Also, if you want to check out any of my other books, you can go to jamiebryantbooks.com. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, goodbye, boys and girls. Goodbye. Boys and girls, what did you think about the story Fish Guts? You liked it? How many of you were grossed out just a little? You were? You weren't? I'm guessing some of you boys who've already, and girls, been fishing with your moms and dads weren't grossed out at all. You probably thought it was what you do normally when you go fishing, right? Well, I hope you enjoyed that video, and I hope if you had never got to gut your own fish, you get to do that. That would be a lot of fun. So I guess I didn't really talk too much about, but when I grew up, I really always did enjoy writing. And I think I always knew even though I didn't get to pursue the career of being an author right away, I always knew I would enjoy writing. I always loved listening to stories and hearing stories too. And so I hope you enjoyed that today. What I didn't say at the beginning when we were talking about fish guts a little bit, as I got older, I remember maybe my late 30s or 40s. I know that seems like a long time away for you boys and girls, but I had some not so great memories about my life growing up. I had some things that happened when I was young, like your all's age, that sometimes weren't super happy memories. But what helped me as I got older, I thought, well, yes, there were some memories maybe not so great, but there were other memories that were awesome. And so really what kind of got me trending and thinking about my great memories was this story today, the one you just heard, Fish Guts. I remember that day I laughed out loud and I thought, I'm gonna write that down. I'm gonna write that down. And I did. I wrote the whole story. After I wrote that story, I remembered another funny time when I was a kid, and then another one, and the next thing you knew, I had this book. So actually, writing stories about the fun, enjoyable times as a kid was actually a good thing for me. It really helped me remember the good times and not just spend any time thinking about things that maybe weren't as great. So I do want to encourage you boys and girls, if you want to be an author, you can. Nowadays, authors are 8 years old, 12 years old, 15 years old. It's really never been so easy to write your story, either do your own illustrations or get an illustrator, and you can get a book in print of your very own. So I want to encourage all of you, if you're thinking along those lines, I know your teachers would probably be happy to help you with some of that information, maybe your parents or an aunt or a friend, but lots of information out there to help you move forward if you'd like to be an author too. Well, before I wrap up today, I do want to share something with you that no one else has got to see. When I finished Fish Guts, I thought of more stories about growing up as a kid, and I also got some stories from my parents and grandparents, and I wrote some of their stories. So in 2021, I will be launching a brand new book. It's not out now, so it can't be found anywhere, and no one other than my immediate family have ever saw the cover. But since you're my hometown, I wanted to share the little sneak peek with you today, so you can be maybe anticipating that coming, and maybe by the time this book is launched, I'll actually get to come to your school and meet some of you in person. So the book title is, are you ready? Let's do a drum roll. Da-da-da-da-da-da. It's called Frog Funeral and Other Bedtime Stories. And as you can well imagine, there is a story in the book called Frog Funeral. So hopefully you'll anticipate and get excited about maybe getting to see that next year. Again, if you were able to get a copy of the book, great, but if not, I know that each school is going to get a couple of copies, and so hopefully you'll be able to check them out and get to read that. And thanks for being an incredible audience. Thank you for living in Richlands and Tazewell and Cedar Bluff and all the surrounding schools. I love you guys. I loved growing up here. It was so awesome, and I love that I get this opportunity to speak to you all face to face. So thank you, Tazewell County schools and teachers and kids, for having me today. I hope each of you have a wonderful, wonderful Christmas this year, and until next time, goodbye. Goodbye, boys and girls.